everyone, and welcome back to The Apex, a weekly conversation with the titans and tastemakers of the automotive world. If you've been enjoying our podcasts and want to help us out, please do share them with your friends and leave a review for us on whatever platform you're listening on. Our guest this week is Mark Harrison, Managing Director at Praga Cars UK, a company with 114 years of engineering excellence behind it, but, until now, somewhat unknown to British motoring enthusiasts. With his significant experience in launching performance vehicles into a competitive marketplace and knowledge of just what it takes to keep a motoring brand focused on its customers, Mark joins us today to talk all things Praga, past, present and future. Mark, welcome to the Apex.
Hi Hector, nice to be here. Nice to meet you.
So before we talk about Praga, could you first maybe introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a bit about your career to date and how you ended up at Praga?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm a titan or a tastemaker of the automotive industry, but hopefully I've got a little bit of story to tell that people might find interesting. I mean, you go back to the start, really. I didn't start out in the automotive industry at all, so I've got kids at the moment sort of looking at university and going to university, and I can stand there and say to them, it doesn't really matter what you do at university, because I had nothing like that in my past, apart from just a general love and interest in cars, really. That's always been there, and racing cars. I actually started out as a fully qualified landscape architect of all things, but did that for a few years, and then I just, by sheer coincidence and luck really, I ended up working on the Camel Trophy in 1995, which not all your listeners will know what the Camel Trophy is. Those who don't,
it was the Land Rover.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's a knockout of World Cup of off-roading really, and I mean it was an amazing event because there was no budget, wasn't an issue. It was a pure off-roading activity. It went to weird and wonderful places, and I was lucky enough to work on the event that was in Central America in 1995, and just on the PR team really that was supporting it through a company called Jardine PR, run by a guy called Tony Jardine, who some of your listeners will know from his past his Formula One history, but also the fact he's the commentator. I think he still does the rallying stage at Goodwood and things like that. So worked for Tony Jardine PR on the Camel Trophy, not knowing at all what automotive PR was. I didn't know what a press office was, didn't really know what journalists did, but just helped out, loved it, and was taken on by Jardine PR to work for Honda, and shows how long it was ago, because Honda were the car sponsor for Manchester United and Glasgow Celtic and Glasgow Rangers, so you couldn't get Honda now at Manchester United, I'm sure, but so we and I loved football as well, so I sort of went to work for them working on their sponsorship of Honda with the football clubs. So we did British touring cars as well. So this would have been late 90s, the sort of David Leslie era. So it was a really good era of British touring cars. So I did a bit of that. I was asked to go and work for Ford in their press office, and worked on the really sort of, not the sexy bits of Ford, but the interesting bits for the company, the bits that actually made the money. So the commercial vehicles, but also the technology division, looked after some of the PR for the Dagenham factory and things like that. So I cut my teeth really as a sort of communications professional there, because part of that involved the closure of the Dagenham car plant and things like that. So really sort of got under the skin of automotive communications and PR, which was amazing at a company like Ford. And then BMW asked me to go and move to Bracknell, to BMW UK headquarters, to help launch the new Mini. And so that was a bit of a dream come true, really. Amazing job to launch the new Mini, partly because it was a fantastic car, and anybody who's bought the first generation, the R53 version of the new Mini will know the engineering was amazing on that car. BMW did a great job on it, but also we had a sort of slight challenge of a German brand telling the world what a British iconic car brand was, so we had to sort of deal with that, which was fascinating. Stayed at BMW for about 9 years in total, and then went to McLaren to launch the car brand there. So I was the PR director for McLaren Automotive when that was launched, and did that for a couple of years, then was asked to go and run McLaren's Middle East operation. So I set that up and ran the business over in the Middle East, then came back to headquarters and did a number of jobs, like managed the sales and marketing for the McLaren P1, which was a privilege, really, an amazing thing to do. Left McLaren after a few years and went into consultancy, and I've worked for people like Rimac on the launch of what was called the Concept 2, now the Navira, and Pininfarina on the Battista electric hypercar launch and things like that. So and then a couple of years ago got a call from these crazy folks at Praga and said, would you come and talk to us about our business and what we're doing? And loved it when I met them, really liked what I saw, liked their ambition. like their honesty. There's very, very little bureaucracy and politics at Praga. It's just classic sort of Central European. This is what we're doing. Let's get on and do it. But combined with that it's got this rich history that very few people know about. So. Yeah. For someone like me that's background is a lot of communications, it's great to come in at this sort of as a brand is growing, but to have that history to tap into. I
was going to say, I mean, that's an amazing CV, but let's talk about Praga, the company, its history. As I mentioned in the introduction, I'm sure that some of our audience, this is the first time they're hearing about it, but it's been around for quite a while. So could you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, just a small matter of 114 years. So, it's the oldest car brand you've never heard of. The good thing with the folks at Praga as well is that they're not embarrassed about that. They're not ashamed about that. It's built up over those years purely as an engineering driven business with zero sales and marketing in effect. So, better that way around than the other way around. It's got its heritage. It's got its, foundation of making things, and that's really at the heart of the best car brands historically have been that way. You look at BMW, and that's where BMW came from, purely engineering driven, and BMW is a good sort of comparison in that Praga historically made really anything with a motor. So before communism really defined a lot of Praga's history, they made everything: race cars, road cars, airplanes, trucks, tanks. We've even found Praga vacuum cleaners and it literally is anything that had a motor they made. Then communism happened. I'm sure it's a bit more complicated than that, as historians will know. But,
the short version is it happened.
Yeah, and Praga was selected by powers that be to make trucks and gearboxes and axles and tanks for the communist world. They actually, before communism, they actually made more cars than Skoda and Tatra combined, and everybody will have heard of Skoda and Tatra. But I think partly because of their success at making cars, then the communists sort of said, well, you can make we don't need cars or racing cars, we need trucks and tanks, so you can make those. And I think they left Skoda and Tatra alone to sort of get on and make some cars. So that defined much of Praga's history as a truck, gearbox, axles manufacturer. And, the way I sort of tend to put it to audiences is if I'm in a room with people and I say you're a communist who needed a truck, you will know who Praga is. But I'm guessing not many people in the room at the moment are communists who needed a truck. So, but then post-communism, the business has worked and produced unbroken for the last 114 years. So post-communism, they really tried to find their feet as an independent private business. And as a lot of people know, post-communism, that takes a while. You're going from into a completely different commercial market. So it takes a while, but they've continued, and they've tried enduro motorcycles in the past and continued down that path of making trucks. So the core business really is the sort of the sexy bit of it at the moment is the racing cars and the go-karts. We've also got an airplane, a short takeoff and landing airplane that's hopefully going to appear next year. But then in the background, they still have what they call the automotive division, which is the truck side of things. So yeah, it's still a multifaceted organisation. It doesn't just work in cars and trucks either. There's other parts of the business, but these are the bits that I'm working on. At the moment the racing car side of things.
So let's talk about the sexier bit of Praga. Maybe we can leave the vacuum cleaners to one side. As far as I'm aware, your main offering is the Praga R1, which is an amazing looking racing car. Could you tell us what makes it special? Who's it for? What the design thoughts were behind it?
Yeah, the interesting thing about the R1 really is that, and what makes it special now is the fact that when the project was started 7, 8, 9 years ago, again, because the company really focused on the engineering design rather than the sales and marketing, they sort of did it opposite way that most normal companies would do. They didn't look at where they could produce a racing car in a series and look at the rules of that series and design a car around the rules. They basically designed what they thought was the purest, most beautiful looking racing car on the planet, and then worried about where it went racing. The problem there is that anybody who's seen the R1 can see where that could cause issues. In the early days, customers that did see it and took the plunge and bought a car would race. It could take on prototypes because of its nature, its structure, its aerodynamics. It sits naturally as a racer that can take on radicals and and these sorts of cars, and it would beat them. And so the owners of the Radicals would say, well, that's a GT car because it's got a roof. So it would also race against GT cars. And because of its aerodynamics and downforce abilities that produced, it would beat them. And the owners of GT3 cars would say, well, it's a prototype. Yeah. So it's taken a few years to really get it accepted. And certainly in the UK, a lot of that is down to the perseverance of our dealer partner over here, VR Motorsport.
Yeah.
In that Vincent, who runs VR Motorsport, saw the car. I mean, this is how it really worked at Prague. He saw the car at an Autosport 4 or 5 years ago, loved what he saw, and just thought, well, I'll buy that and see what happens and try and go racing with it.
See where I can take it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's, it led to discussions with Motorsport UK as it is now, and which meant he had to engineer a roll bar for the car, which is a bit daft when you think it's a full carbon chassis, a full carbon monocoque with a roof. The roll bar really does very little, has no purpose, but rules are rules. So he engineered a roll bar, got it approved, and got it into Britcar, who took it in. And now we've found ourselves in a really strong position where we've announced a one-make race series for next year. So it is genuine sort of snowball gathering momentum, and it's partly because the more people see the car, the more people love it and get it and want to get involved in it. So it does feel like there's a huge momentum at the moment. So,
because that was one of the questions that we had here when we were looking at the R1 was, what is its direct competition? Because it's basically, it looks like quite a fancy prototype. And as you said, it's all carbon. It looks a lot more high performance than some of the GT cars we see. And yet it kind of, from reading about it, you get the impression that it's fairly affordable to run as well. I mean, compared to something, much, much fancier. So what would you say is its kind of direct competition?
Well, I know everybody answers this the same way, and they say, well, it has no direct competition, but it genuinely has no direct competition. At its price point, it's under £200,000, but at the same time, now that we've increased demand and interest in the car, if you buy a car as a team, you can pretty quickly see after, it can wash its face as an investment after one season and start to make profit after the second season. When we see what the teams are currently charging their drivers to race in the car, how much it costs to buy the car or take the car on finance, and then the relatively low running costs, it starts to stack up on all sorts of directions, because not only that, but it also, the car, I'm biased, but the car looks great. I mean, everybody who sees the car racing loves the way it looks. The racing, when they do take on each other, is really toe to toe. So it appeals to sponsors as well. And I think the program we've built up this year, and certainly what we've got planned for next year, the audiences we've started to really tap into, both motorsport, but also general sort of fan base of some of the drivers that race with us. It's moving on a pace there. So I think, as well as that, the engineering of the car itself, it's got a really reliable 2-litre Renault Alpine turbocharged engine, Hewland gearbox that is well known and easy to maintain. So the powertrain is reliable, trusted, easy to look after, because the car's light. It's only 640 kilos. The wear on the tyres is light as well. So it stacks up on a whole number of levels as far as it in the marketplace. So we've got great hopes for it. So,
because you mentioned there that you're getting new people coming through the door. I mean, I'm sure that counts for sort of new kinds of customers. But one thing that is interesting, that I first came across Praga when I was doing some sim racing and online karting back in the dark days of lockdown. And I noticed that you guys have been growing a presence in that space. How did that all start?
Well, it was a bit of a combination of a natural interest from some of the people involved in the sim racing world anyway. We have a quite a long-standing friendship with Roman Grosjean, and Roman had started his R8G esports team. So there's a lot of conversation about, we should do this anyway. Combine that with the challenges of last year, and the concern over the potential of not going racing at all last year, then it seemed a natural thing to do. So we sort of dipped our toe in it and enjoyed what we did. And I think you raced, and we got, we did a little bit of sim racing, and it went down really well. And again, it's a bit like the real racing. The car looks great in the sim. And so, I mean, we were really lucky in the fact that we pretty much had the full race season on the track as well. despite all the challenges last year, which is really testament to, well, Motorsport UK, Britcar, everybody involved in doing the right thing to allow us to go racing last season. So it worked from both ends, really. And I think that, looking ahead to what that did for us, was it opened up conversations as far as talking to sim racers about going real racing. And I guess you want to talk about that as well in a minute.
Absolutely,
but also it does mean that we've sort of tested the water a little bit in the world of sim racing, and we've got some amazing plans for next year in the world of sim racing. I can't go into any detail on at the moment, but we'll really move things on the pace there. So it worked really well.
Yeah. So I mean, let's talk about the sim racing, because I think it's quite an interesting approach that you guys have taken. You've been working with some well-known automotive YouTubers. I think Jimmy Broadbent is one of the most popular ones, and it's interesting that obviously, I mean, you can talk about this, but you've paired people like that up with professional racing drivers, people like Jem Hepworth. What does this give Praga, working with these YouTubers?
Well, first and foremost, someone like Jimmy, he's done his YouTube films through this season racing with us that have been watched over 3.5 million times. So it gives us a huge audience off the bat for a brand that nobody, as we said earlier, nobody had ever heard of. So, and I'm quite lucky in a way in this area, because my experience of gaming was really going into my son's bedroom and shouting at him, saying, "What are you doing, wasting your time playing or watching Fortnite?"
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different world to me. So I sort of come at this from a position of knowing nothing about gaming, and how we came across Jimmy, and Jimmy's been fantastic, because he started the season, he'd never raced a car in his life, and yet he's been thrown into an R1 full downforce race car in a competitive race series, and did really well. He built up slowly through the season and ended up winning the last two races at the final round 2 weeks ago with his partner Gordy Much. So and he was in tears at the end of it, and you saw that and you thought, wow, that you could. So how it all came about really was that we sat around and thought, well, we need to build the brand. It's there's a good story here. How do we do that? And the owner of the company sort of threw down a challenge and said, well, if I send you 5 factory cars to race in Britcar, and you can populate those cars with an interesting group of drivers who will raise our brand presence, will that work? So I said immediately, yes, that'll work. I put the phone down, and then I thought, oh my God, what do I do now? But I made some calls, I spoke to a few people, and the nice thing is, if you find the right people to do this, and I met them all and looked them in the eye, and you can see if people committed to this, because someone like Jimmy, if he doesn't take it seriously, he's going to look pretty daft to his fans and followers. So anybody who put their hand up, you knew they were going to be committed to it and deal with it really well. So Jimmy, we had Jay Morton, who some of your listeners will know, who's worked really well with us this season. Ben Collins has joined us, the ex-Stig from Top Gear, James Walker, Mr. JWW, and a number of others that came along through the season. And it was great to see, how seriously they took it. They, it really was a chance for them to raise something, that really challenged them. And so, and it's just raised the awareness of the brand massively. And, we hope we'll be bringing some of these guys back next season. Yeah.
I mean, do you think to an extent the sim racing gaming community is sometimes underestimated when it comes to, I think, car racing in particular? The reason I ask is that, I've spoken to a number of these guys over the years, and what does come out is that, it's not just someone playing a game, it's people are setting up their cars digitally. They're learning about the history of these machines. They feel a real bond with them that seems to translate into real life a lot easier than you would expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a serious business. It's, the fact that all the F1 drivers, most of the F1 drivers are doing it now. Roman's got his esports team. Jimmy, I think Jimmy's again is a great case in point, where he turned up at the first test day, sort of pretty much crapping himself, I guess, but got in the car. We had an awful race weekend at Snetterton where it was just bucketing down solidly for 2 days. he didn't balk at that, just got in the car and just got on with it. And, I think, and it's not just him either, I think you see this across the board now. Gordy Much, who raced with him at Donington Park, is a great example where Gordy's background is real racing, but he's also one of the fastest drivers in Roman's R8G sim racing team now. So there's an absolute correlation, but I think fundamentally, the difference is that, and Jimmy would say this, is that it's the real racing is, a huge step up in just I guess the risk against reward sort of, both are higher in real racing than in sim racing, and for all the obvious reasons. So, but that's been one of the most exciting things about this year. Actually, has been seeing how there's that combination between sim and real racing. It's fascinating.
And as you say, it seems to translate very well often.
Yeah.
And something else I wanted to ask, I mean, just drawing on your career a bit and drawing on where we are in the automotive space at the moment, plenty of changes going on. I mean, your career has been deeply involved in lots of performance car brands. I think ownership of performance cars now, the nature of it is changing. What's your take on it? Are real enthusiasts going to migrate more to the track now to get their kicks? What's your kind of perspective on it?
Yes. Simple answer. No, I think, I've been really lucky in the last few years in being at the heart of McLaren as they launched their road car business at a terrible time to launch a road car business. It was the middle of 2009, 2010 when the world was in a terrible state. And
last time it was in a terrible state.
Yeah, exactly. And have developed their brand. It's not been perfect for them, but they're up and running. And certainly, the feedback we got when we launched the 12C at McLaren was that certainly our major competitors at the time, I think they thought that McLaren would give up after the first car, and that didn't happen. So I've sort of seen that come through, and then been really lucky to work on the world of electric hypercars. They have their own challenges in, one of the biggest challenges at McLaren was actually getting people to put an order down on a McLaren P1, weirdly enough, in the fact that by the time the first car got to a customer, we had a huge reserve list of people wanting to buy the car. But initially it was quite a challenge simply because it was a new technology, a hybrid supercar, and there's plenty of people that wanted it, loved the way it looked, but actually were saying, well, I'm not going to put any money down until I test drive that because I haven't got a clue what that means. Yeah. That moved on apace with the electric hypercars, and I think the three brands that are doing electric hypercars are finding that at the moment the challenge is that it's on paper and in pictures it looks great, but actually I want to test drive this car. So you now get to a sort of area where what's the next move? And I think the next move, as you say, will be for cars to go on tracks because both technology-wise and performance-wise, cars, 700 now 700 horsepower is a sort of low base for a supercar or a hypercar. Exactly. So, it's 800, 900, 1,000 horsepower. Well, you can't translate that onto the road. The tyres won't allow it. The roads won't allow it, certainly in the UK and places like that. And also legislators won't allow it. So as power is going up and weight is going up, there's less opportunity to drive that car on the road. And so you're seeing, certainly in the States, a huge growth of private motorsport clubs and private tracks with 20, 30, 40, 50 garages. We've got a partnership. We're working with Escapade at Silverstone, actually, the private sort of members club that's being developed at Silverstone. And so that's only going in one direction. So as there's more need to have cars going on tracks, there's more demand being built up to support that. And certainly it works for us. If you look at the R1 as a potential track car, and we did design and build a one-off prototype road legal version of that, actually the R1R, you can certainly see that as owners of hypercars and supercars move to the tracks, they will suddenly realise really even more how compromised their road cars are for the tracks.
Absolutely.
So we'll be looking to almost go to lower power, lighter weight, and really test their abilities on the track. So it's not about testing their cars; it's about testing their own abilities. So it's a step nearer to them being a racing driver, and we're ready to take them on and help them deliver that. So I think this is part of the reason I went to Praga, actually, because I felt 2 years ago that this was a really interesting area to look at. And even more in the last 12 months, it's just, I think it's accelerating towards racetracks.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is the racetrack will be where you get, the smaller wheels, the smaller chassis, smaller brakes, less wasteful, more resourceful tire management, technologies. It's quite funny that the racetrack seems to be where all this stuff is actually going to be.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for the big manufacturer, call them big manufacturers, but the supercar brands, is that they still need to sell, compared to Praga, say, a huge volume of cars, and the track, they will still need to design cars for the road. And Praga works in an organisation called ESCA, European Small Car Association, which was founded, I think, by McLaren and Aston Martin when we launched the 12C back in the day at McLaren. And that's really, I guess you'd call it a lobbying organisation into Brussels to sort of really lobby for the fact that small volume car brands, which are mainly supercar manufacturers, let's face it, need support. And I think, that's going to be a really important part of how we work, because legislators, fundamentally, they're not car people, so they don't really care too much about how beautiful a Pagani Huayra is, or the history of Lamborghini. It's irrelevant to them. They and for all the right reasons, they want to lower casualties on the road and keep the air clean. So absolutely right. But so we're doing a lot of work at the moment trying to really convince the powers that be that there is a place for these you and I would think are as beautiful, emotional, engaging products that appeal to enthusiasts, because enthusiasts are designing them and making them. So there's the track side of things is the future, but also there needs to be work to make sure that the cars that we love are still going to be viable on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to ask, so what lies in the future for Praga? Near future, mid future? Can we look forward to an exciting 2022?
I can.
Will you work there?
It's we've got some ambitions that will really stretch our small team of people, but it's fundamentally the first major priority at the moment is we've announced probably a year ahead of schedule a one-make race series for the UK called the Praga Cup 2022. Ownership has committed to at least 16 cars on the grid. Awesome. Because that's obviously always the concern for anybody entering a new one-make race series is, are there going to be enough cars on the grid? Well,
absolutely.
We have committed to there will be 16 by hook or by crook. So that should drive interest in that. We're seeing interest already, frankly. So we had 10 cars on the grid at Donington Park 2 weeks ago. So we're looking forward to launching that. That will take up a lot of our time and energy to do that properly, because then the plan for Praga is to really take the UK as a template. We're not big enough to do all this outside of one market at the moment, but if we do it properly in the UK, the rest of the world looks at the UK for its motorsport and mostly for its supercar heritage. So we'll then look at how we take what we're doing to the USA, to the Middle East, and to other markets. We've set up a small initial global dealer market. So we've got some really nice partners in Benelux, Australia, Poland, California, UAE, out of Dubai, and the UK. So we'll work with them again to build up their work with us. And we, as I said earlier, we've got a pretty amazing sim campaign to announce quite soon, which will raise a few eyebrows. But you can imagine with the sort of partners we've got with Jimmy, with RHG, that we think we can do something pretty special there. The karting division that I don't really work directly with, but the karting division is growing and looking at electric karts, and clearly for me, there's a funnel of sales there. If we can engage 14, 15, 16-year-olds in our karting business, then it's a quick step into the R1, which is a great racing car for novices, as we've talked about. So lots of things going on, and one or two other things that I can't talk about here and now that will appear next year as well.
Awesome. All sounds really exciting. We're coming up on time now, so I've just got some quick fire questions to end with. So the first one is, what is your dream track or road car? I think probably there's three cars and they've all got the number one in them, I think. So at BMW UK, we had an amazing heritage fleet. The PR director there, Chris Willow's built up a really great fleet of cars. And because I'm a sort of kid of the 70s, then the BMW M1, 70s and 80s, the BMW M1 we had a red BMW M1 that a lot of the listeners will have seen at various events around the UK, and it usually turns up at Lister Sunday Scramble and things like that. And I once got the opportunity to drive that, which was amazing. That was memorable for me.
And then the McLaren F1 for all the obvious reasons, having worked at McLaren and seeing the cars every day at the Boulevard. Never got the chance to drive one, but then I did get the chance to drive the McLaren P1 as in the development phase of that, and that was just incredible, unforgettable. So, and they're all sort of road stroke race track cars as well, which is really nice.
And what was there one more?
No, M1, F1, and P1. That'll do.
Okay, so second question is your favourite racing venue?
I guess really it's sort of it's as a kid really that sort of sets your views, doesn't it, for the rest of your life. And I used to spend a lot of time at Cadwell Park. My dad used to take us racing to watch racing at any opportunity. So I'm from Lincolnshire. Spent a lot of time at Cadwell Park, which I just love as a place. Yeah. And we used to go to the Speedway and the stock cars at Boston. That's not there anymore, but nice dirt oval track in Boston, Lincolnshire. And back in the day as well, we used to go to Brands Hatch quite a lot in the days where you could literally just turn up on the gate and walk into a Grand Prix. So we did a lot of that because my dad spent a lot of time in Kent before we had kids. And more modern times, I guess, I had an amazing experience at the Yas Marina racetrack when I was working out in the Middle East. So I persuaded Chris Goodwin to give me a lap of Yas Marina in a McLaren P1 at full chat and as a passenger. And the great thing about that was it meant I could get out and I could say to Chris, right, I never have to go and do another bloody passenger ride again in my life because it's never going to be any better than that. So
Amazing. And so final question is, what's one piece of advice you've got for someone thinking of getting into amateur racing?
I think probably, I don't know, how would you put it? Be fast and be nice. And I don't know if those two things go together. But I think, there's, as I say, I haven't worked at the coalface of motorsport before this job. So a lot of it is, I've spent time with racing drivers, but actually seeing them in action. I think you look at some of the kids that are out there and they've all got dreams of being professional racing drivers, and rightly so. And, but I think the key point to make is that only a small percentage of you will become a professional racing driver. So for the 95% that won't actually become a professional racing driver, there's still lots of opportunities to work in motorsport. So, work hard at your dream, be fast, be committed to being fast, but also think about, at the end of the day, you want to be able to pick up the phone to somebody you met at the racetrack a few years before and then remember you in a good light. So I think, there's plenty of young drivers out there who will tell you they're the fastest thing out there, but actually you need to keep relationships strong with people and build a good network, frankly. I think that's as important.
That's some very good advice to end on. Well, Mark, we're up on time, so just leaves me to thank you very much for such an interesting interview.
Absolute pleasure. No, it's great. Thank you.
The Apex is powered by Custodian, a new platform for car enthusiasts designed to help you manage your car from anywhere. Using the latest technology, it takes the pain out of ownership and lets you just enjoy the drive, because Custodian will take care of the rest. So if you believe life starts after 6,000 RPM, you need to be on Custodian. Join us now at www.custodian.club to sign up for early access and get ready to enjoy your car like never before.